All right, welcome fight fans to transmission number 6 of the coup d'etat of boxing, a live weekly boxing podcast airing every Sundays at 9 p.m. Central European Time, live here on YouTube. A joint venture between myself, Corruption in Boxing, and my joint venture co-host, Official Scorecard Boxing Science. Official, how you doing?
Very well. Still amazed at what we were witnessing this night, last night. Very good. Well, can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's yet another ridiculously late US cards, which is unbelievably punishing for certainly all of us in Europe having to, satisfy our fiendish obsession for boxing. It kind of destroys the following day, especially if you got families, etc. You end up waking up at like 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it kind of destroys your Sunday, which you tend to sort of spend, recuperating, doing your sort of household chores, etc., spending time with the wife and the kids, etc. But something we've been doing, it's pervasive, it's protracted, it's probably not going to change as much as we try and like to, cut back a little bit, and just seems to get progressively worse. So you just end up apologizing to your other half that eventually it will stop, and you'll catch the fights in the morning, but your appetite for the big fights comes back, and we had it yesterday with the dust is still settling on the most anticipated fight of the year, undoubtedly. Lightweight division, a fight which was once the ramblings between the sanctioning bodies, once they came to a bit of a conciliation regarding the status of the franchise championship, once they had agreed that it was unifiable and that the regular championship held by Devin Haney was not recognized in that sort of context. All 4 belts were up for grabs. Vasiliy was defending his WBO, WBC franchise, WBO Super, with a record of 14-1 up against Teofimo Lopez, defending his IBF championship. This was for me, it was an exciting fight. It had a fight of dramas. It was a fight of two halves, and ultimately, official in watching the fight. Certainly, this morning, having recuperated on some sleep and watching it sort of fully awake and having the ability to maybe slow down the action and focus on some of the potential swing rounds which were visible yesterday. This was an extremely close, razor close fight, contrary to what the judges may have seen. And it wouldn't have even mattered if you factored in knockdowns, etc. There was only one winner on the cards as far as the judges were concerned, and that was Teofimo Lopez, a scenario that we had entertained last week, in that he's clearly the more marketable fighter for Top Rank. So to me, it wasn't beyond the realms of possibility that Teofimo Lopez would, had the fight gone to the cards, he would have been the recipient of a decision. And he's an American-born fighter, so he's extremely far easier to market. And looking at the sheer volume of betting which was levied not only in casinos but across, Teofimo's bets in terms of frequency of numbers outweighed Vasiliy, and it kind of appealed to the younger sort of demographics. So it's logical in that sense that Top Rank would be analyzing that as well and thinking that he's clearly appealing to the younger generation. Boxing is desperate for stars, something they clearly don't have at the moment. There is a void, given that Manny Pacquiao and some of these legendary fighters are literally on the brink of retiring from the sport. So the impetus is needed for an injection of young, talented fighters who do appeal, have a fan, sort of a friendly style that can attract casual fans as well. Teofimo, once he had agreed to the purse, and maybe he received a higher purse, but he was definitely pushing and sort of promoting the fight as well. The bad blood was sort of factored in. There was genuine sort of animosity between the two fighters, and we saw it. We certainly saw that in the fight. And now, in sort of analyzing the fight, there's been a lot of unwarranted criticism regarding Vasiliy Lomachenko's performance coming into the fight. Now, we saw from the weigh-in that Vasiliy had reinforced his upper body, specifically his neck and his upper back. That is clearly a fighter who is wary of the power of his opponent and is trying to fortify his punch resistance. Now, you've got to look at the whole aspects. He's 9 years older. He's had significantly more miles on the clock, having, a substantial amateur program from starting boxing a lot earlier as well. So, and we've seen that he's ascended through 3 different weight categories, and he's now clearly fighting at a higher weight category. So there's a lot of adversity that he's facing now. And when you factor in the wear and tear on his bodies as well, he's had surgeries, multiple broken hands. So the body is not impervious to these sort of wear and tears and injuries. It happens through a rigid and tough and kind of a unique training program that he goes through. You've got to remember, Vasiliy, much like the other Ukrainians, they incorporate a lot of sports as part of their boxing training. So they're playing soccer, tennis. There's a lot of track and field they do. A lot of unique and sort of mental exercises. So it's very different from the general blueprint sort of white label training programs that maybe other fighters in different countries will kind of implement. So it's tough on the body. So Vasiliy was realizing that he's fighting against a bigger fighter, somebody who has displayed power, somebody who's only gone 12 rounds once in 15 fights. So Vasiliy was clearly wary of the power, and he wanted to insulate himself as much as he could. So he looked strong, certainly upper body wise, and I think the strategy from both fighters was clear, and both of them had disseminated their strategy. There was clearly no stealth or no information warfare. None of them were reticent about disclosing, exactly what their game plans were. Now, we saw with Teofimo, who had brought in Joey Gamache into his training camp, and Teofimo's strategy, I think, was clear that he was going to play, he was going to try and bully Vasiliy Lomachenko from the opening bell. He was the bigger fighter, and he was going to try and push Vasiliy onto the back foot. He had the anecdotes before that Vasiliy couldn't fight on the back foot, so they were clear in their strategy. And Teofimo was doing a lot of body work with Joey. Joey was wearing the protective around his waist, and they were targeting the body as well. So, and Vasiliy has a disproportionately large sort of upper body. So the body is always one area that can be targeted. So it was the correct strategy in forcing Vasiliy onto the back foot and try and target the body. Now, conversely, I think Vasiliy's strategy, he had also indicated that possibly a 12-round fight in which he was going to try and take the starch out of Teofimo's punches by forcing him to miss for the early part of the fight. But the key for a southpaw is that the objective is to slip the jabs and the heavy punches. But Vasiliy was taking the punches on the gloves. He wasn't slipping the punches, nor was he able to jab with Teofimo, which was surprising to me because Teofimo's jab, it was relatively quick, but he wasn't. Once he was throwing the jab, his left hand was quite low, so he wasn't jabbing from a high guard position. It wasn't necessarily a quick jab, but he was very active, and he was throwing very hard punch. It was a hard thudding jab, and the key was Vasiliy was not to suffer too much damage during the early part of the fight, knowing that Teofimo has been struggling to make 135 pounds, has clearly indicated that he's going to be moving up subsequently, has only fought one 12-round fight, doesn't have a vast level of professional experience. So it was to get him into deep waters and pour it on later on in the fight and potentially try and knock him out late on in the fight. Because a lot of the over and under positions was around sort of 11 rounds. So Vasiliy was indicating maybe he'd get him out there in the 11th or the 12th round. So in retrospect, it wasn't a bad strategy. And we know boxing is about margins. If Vasiliy had got Teofimo Lopez out of the fight in the 11th round, which he was very close to doing, then we would have been eulogizing on a perfectly calibrated strategy. But unfortunately, people have gone to the other extremes in saying that he did absolutely fuck all for the first half of the fight. But when you're facing a significantly bigger fighter who's throwing very hard punches, relatively quick punches, and Teofimo's punches were forcing Vasiliy out of position, and that was one of the key points. And I think one of the most significant aspects of the first round was that Teofimo Lopez what he did was, when he was forcing Vasiliy back, so Vasiliy couldn't get lead foot position, couldn't slip the jab, get lead foot position, which opens up his left hand, takes Teofimo Lopez's jab out, makes it very hard for him to actually land a right hand. He can only really right hook it. But what Teofimo did was that he was cutting off Vasiliy's space very well, didn't allow him to start pivoting on the right. And what he did, he landed, I think, one of the hardest punches that Teofimo definitely threw. He landed a right hook, which initially, in watching the fight, it looked like it penetrated the guard, but it was actually around the guard, and it landed flush, and you could clearly see that it hurt Vasiliy. He definitely launched into it, put his entire body into it. And Vasiliy was definitely hurt by the punch. Now, it is those sort of punches that makes a fighter almost like reassess and saying that, look, maybe I've got to be a little bit more patient. Maybe I've got to, now that I've tasted his power, the power is not superficial. It definitely is genuine. So maybe I've got to be a little bit more patient, not take too many of them, make him keep loading up, make him keep missing. Eventually, he's definitely going to get tired. Once he gets tired and there's not enough starch and zip on the punches, that's when I can launch my attacks. But from the judge's perspective, when Vasiliy is only really relying on defense as one of his scoring components, the judge is not going to award Vasiliy the fight, even though Teofimo Lopez was predominantly hitting the high guard. He wasn't hitting Vasiliy up top. Apart from the first round, a lot of the punches Vasiliy was taking, and he was taking body shots, and you could clearly see bruising and sort of redness around the body. But he was taking body shots when Teofimo's punches were hitting Vasiliy on the high guard. He was literally bouncing off the ropes. Teofimo was following in, cutting off his real estate, forcing Lomachenko to pivot out onto his left into Teofimo's right hand, in which he was landing those body shots because Vasiliy was more conscious about protecting his chin and certainly his temple area for any sort of equilibrium punches. So the judges were giving Teofimo the early rounds based on activity, and he was the ring general. He was the one who was pushing Vasiliy back onto his back foot and moving sort of laterally around the ring and literally not throwing any punches, only landing, just intermittent sort of, jabs, maybe one or two, but still trying to look at the sequence of what Teofimo was doing. But Teofimo didn't give him many opportunities to counter because it was, the punches were coming at a quite an odd sort of trajectory, low hand position, not necessarily a high guard position. He was just using, I think, a classic sort of the bigger fighter tactics, bully the opponent, throw hard fighting punches, cut off the ring, wear him down, break him down and try and knock him out. It was something we see, certainly Vladimir Klitschko, those sort of tactics that he tends to that he was dictating with his jab. And it was, to me, it was kind of, very reminiscent of what Vlad Klitschko was doing. But it was not until the sixth round for me in which Vasiliy started to slip the punches instead of taking the punches on the high guard. And he began to actually get a little bit of lead hand control, starting to jab over Teofimo's low lead hand. And that was something I was surprised that he just took too long to start doing. I felt he could have done it early on. There was clearly opportunities in which he could have, thrown that lead hand over. He likes to get underneath the lead hand, throw the straight left hand, get on the outside. Then he would fire those body shots. And he began doing that. And it sort of coincided with Teofimo definitely getting tired. So that gave Vasiliy opportunities to come forward. And you could see Teofimo's defense was capitulating Certainly didn't have the same composure, was foolishly employing the shoulder roll when your opponent is getting progressively stronger, so you're not in the comfortable position. And to me, it was a horrendously bad tactics to be employing that shoulder roll. You don't do it when you're in adversity. You generally tend to do it is when you're dictating the fight and you're able to roll off the punches off the shoulder and then come back when you've got prime sort of foot position and you've literally got your opponent sort of pinned down. That's when it's better. Or if you're a natural counter puncher but you've got good leverage, that's when you can use the shoulder roll. But no, it was the wrong tactic, and Vasiliy was starting to land body shots as well. He was landing all of the clean shots. So Teofimo Lopez, for me, I think won the first 5 rounds, I think. But 6th round onwards was when Vasiliy was definitely getting progressively stronger. Not too much sustained dominance, but he was definitely occupying the center of the ring, not moving laterally, lead hand, lead foot position, landing the better punches, I think the harder punches as well. That's when Teofimo was starting to counter punch, when he was when Vasiliy was in more close quarters, which is not a bad tactic. Because what Teofimo was doing before is that when Vasiliy was in the first 5 rounds, when he was trying to get lead foot position and try and pivot off to the right, Teofimo would cut off the ring and he would throw the uppercut. Now, the uppercut wouldn't always land, but it was a deterrent. And I'm sure Vasiliy felt the reverberations off the gloves, certainly off the elbows as well, knowing that Teofimo definitely studied the tactics which Vasiliy was going to implement. So he clearly had studied, and it wasn't a bad, it was a pretty well calibrated, well thought out, game plan from Teofimo. And he showed some heart as well. He was taking heavy punches. Vasiliy pretty much won everything from 7 to 11. In the 11th round, I think he came very, very close to getting a knockdown, and I think he definitely probably needed a knockdown maybe at that stage as well. Teofimo rallied in the 12th round, but a lot of the punches he was doing, he was hitting heavy high guard as well. And I think the 12th round is one of the swing rounds. He was landing body shots, but the commentators and a lot of boxing media was talking about he was landing significantly headshots and he was hurting Vasiliy. I didn't see any of that whatsoever. I saw him landing body shots, but I saw Vasiliy was landing the headshots. So you can make a strong argument that Vasiliy actually won the 12th round. So in all, it was a very, very close fight, razor close fight. 6 rounds each is the way I scored the fight. Initially, I thought it was maybe a 7-5 Teofimo, but in watching the early 5 rounds, not a lot of clean headshots, a lot of punches being blocked and parried on the high guard, but difficult to give Vasiliy the rounds. He wasn't throwing any punches. He wasn't throwing with him. He wasn't countering. He wasn't getting lead hand. He was definitely wary of the power, very cautious. He didn't want to be knocked out. He was clearly hurt in the first round. So maybe it made him pursue his attacks a little bit longer. But to his detriment, it was too late. But it wouldn't have made any difference had he scored a knockdown in the 11th or the 12th. If Julie Lederman is given 119.09, then that is an absolutely absurd scorecard. It was a very, very close fight. Could have gone either way. If anybody had scored the fight 7 rounds to 5 each way, I don't have a problem with that. I think 6-6 is a fair scorecard. I don't think anybody outright won the fight. There was only one person who was winning the fight at the back end of the fight, and we know the second half of the fight is very key sometimes in dissuading the judges on who is dominating the fight, because it shows that if Teofimo's aggression was super effective the first half of the fight, then Vasily clearly would not have been in the position to mount a major rebound in the second half of the fight and dominate the second half of the fight. And you can make the argument that if anybody was hurt more in the fight, it was Teofimo Lopez in the 11th round, because he was definitely on queer street, taking heavy punches, taking clean punches. But he showed his heart, showed his will, showed good skill, came back in the 12th round, good little insurrection. But I'm not sure whether Teofimo Lopez should be the undisputed champion based on what I see, and I think I've scored the fight objectively. Yeah, those are my thoughts, official. What about yourself?
Oh, okay. First of all, speaking of staying late, staying up till 8 a.m. in the morning in order to watch the fights live, I think it's as taxing as it was taxing for Lomachenko to get on the inside against Teofimo. But yeah, first of all, I would like to say huge respect to Teofimo Lopez. I have to stress that, because look what he did, 22, 23 years old. It really, I was a day or two before the fight, I was on our friends Unravel Boxing Tokyo News podcast, and Jimmy was on there saying that basically he was giving props to Teofimo for fighting Loma so early in his career. And indeed, it's such a throwback fighter, throwback type of fighter move, in this era where the young fighters are too careful, trying too hard to protect their careers, to play it safe their whole careers, stepping up in their 30s to finally fight big fights. Some of the so-called top fighters like Crawford and even Spence, they still haven't fought A-level opposition, and they're in their 30s, and maybe they're about to finally start fighting each other, hopefully. But anyways, speaking of this fight, yeah, Teofimo is such a throwback fighter for taking this fight. Yeah, the way I scored it, I had the exact same scorecard as you, 6-6. And with that being said, I don't have anything against anyone scoring 7-5 for Teofimo or 7-5 for Loma. Me myself, I gave the 2nd, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th round. Those were 6 clear rounds, in my opinion, to Loma. And yeah, you can make the case that there were a couple of swing rounds, maybe the 4th round and the 12th round. Ultimately, anyways, I really gave the 12th round to Teofimo, but Loma was doing a wonderful work earlier in that round as well. He was landing many shots, like you said, many great shots. Now about Loma's game plan. Yeah, first 6 rounds, it was extremely boring. I was kind of surprised that he started so late, although you know what, there are 2 things. First, he may have had this game plan. Probably he had this exact game plan of taking Teofimo's sting away in the first half of the fight, because he knew he's such a strong puncher, and he definitely felt his power once he was in the ring with him. Now, in the first 6 rounds, I gave 5 of them to Teofimo, except the 2nd round. My problem with scorecards are like that particular 2nd round. I'm not saying that Loma won it by much, but he really started landing, snapping not only jabs, but swivel jabs, kind of hybrid hooks and jabs that he likes to throw, just like Pacquiao. And yeah, there was no pity patting from him. Those were had when he was throwing punches, he had mean intentions. You know, he really wanted to get Teofimo's respect, although he was not active enough to win more than one round. Arguably the fourth round, which was close, but I gave it to Teofimo. I didn't have time to rewatch it, but I think I was able to see pretty very well what was happening watching it live. Yeah, so one school of thoughts is that Loma clearly wanted to take some sting away from his punches early on, and that's why it took him so much time before starting finally attacking Teofimo. But also maybe he was planning, I would guess, that maybe he was planning to start a bit earlier, but at the same time, Teofimo's activity and smart footwork, the way he was negating Lomachenko's foot positioning, as well as his body punches and protecting the space in front of him, made not Teofimo, made Loma very tentative. So that's why he was really hesitant to step on the inside, because Teofimo was throwing a lot of body punches. Now, speaking of his performance, by the way, big up to True School Sports, who is in the chat, our big friend. Thank you for being here. Congrats to Loma. I hope you enjoyed the fight. But let me get back to the fight itself. Gonzalo on BDA mirrored my thoughts by saying that Lomachenko was also hesitant in the earlier rounds. He took him such a long time before coming forward against Teofimo because of those body punches. And I think that the last round, the 12th round, really explains and confirms that thought, because in the first half of the fight, of the 12th round, Vasiliy really was really doing an amazing job, landing a lot of punches. I mean, from the 7th round on, every round he was really hurting Teofimo. Really had chance in every of those rounds, to really stop him, because he was hurting him so much, including the 12th round. But the way Teofimo was able to change the flow of the last round was, as Loma was very aggressive, he was going for broke. So he started throwing punches to the body, combos to the body, although he was really very tired. But he mustered the courage to throw punches, to stay active in that last round. And that's how he started hurting Loma in the last round, being that Loma was coming forward, was in front of him. He started aiming that body with body punches, with combinations to the body, and then moving upstairs, kind of like what Linares was doing in their fight. And that was exactly when he started hurting Loma in that last round. But by the way, Loma showed, in the first half of the fight, he showed extremely good defense. He was blocking a lot of punches upstairs. Yeah, it looked like Teofimo was controlling the fight, but when you're talking about the landed punches, it was not by much, because Loma was doing really great defensive work. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'll let you continue, because I'm sure I have many more things to say about the fight. But I have
Yeah,
to think.
no, that was some excellent points as per usual from you, official. Now, one of the first things you mentioned was congratulating Teofimo for taking this fight. Absolutely. And fighters like Gervonta Tank Davis and Miguel Berchelt should should have learnt, and they had numerous opportunities to fight Vasily at super featherweight, and both of them declined. And there is no, it is not a not really up for dispute whether they both of them absolutely declined the fight. And in case of Gervonta Davis, it was one of the most high profile ducks in which his promoter come out and said, there's no way we are fighting. So absolutely, and there was so many variables coming into this fight that we didn't really know too much about Teofimo. Could he transition from being an ambush counterpuncher and have that ability to actually fight on the front foot and fight like a genuine big man and sort of bully his opponent? Because clearly he was getting bullied at times by Nakatani, who was bigger than him. So he was clearly having some issues with a bigger man. And it goes to show that, this is not an aberration. It happens in boxing. It's difficult sometimes when you're giving up all of the physical advantages. It's not easy. You can just walk in and fight on the inside. Generally, if you're a heavier puncher, then you can fight on the inside. But there are subtleties and there are methodologies in which to get to the inside. And we know Vasily is significantly better on the inside. But Teofimo wasn't voluntarily getting out of the pocket when they were fighting in the second half of the fight. It was Vasily's domination that was effectively pushing him back, forcing him to get out. Combination of being tired and being hurt, but it was not out of his own volition. But it was the domination from Vasily. So, but on the first half of the fight, Vasily, he was very reluctant about engaging and getting to sort of that short range in which he likes to land punches up through the middle, specifically where he has his faster hands, faster feet, better sort of combination punching are more effective. But when you're being hurt by body shots and head shots, it is difficult. And ultimately, it is a bit of a travesty, and maybe there's a referendum that we need in boxing, because clearly, why is defense part of the scoring criteria when judges are clearly not even concerned or not even focused on judging? Clearly, if there's a scenario being played out where there is not a vast amount of clean punches from either fighter, so effective aggression is null and void if clean punching is few and far between. So it does come down to ring generalship, and it does come down to defense. But clearly, ring generalship has a much heavier loading in the eyes of all of these judges than defense. But defense is one of the most hardest skills to have in boxing. It's not a case of just simply having a high guard and blocking punches or having very quick feet and running. It involves a far higher degree of skill, but the judges are not even interested. And Vasily was showing good defense, but the thing is, if you're not repelling punches, you're only landing sort of single one or two punches. It's difficult to give that fighter, because it comes down to activity and aggression and who is the ring general, and the judges felt that Teofimo was purveying those characteristics much better than Vasily. So I guess that that was the rationale behind some of these wide scorecards. But in going back to Vasily now, the way he structures his boxing, it's in phases. Now, the first phase is always reconnaissance with him. Maybe that's a euphemism for being a slow start or whatever, but a lot of these prime sort of cerebral boxers tend to do that. They all tend to start a little bit slower, primarily because they're observing. They're sometimes giving their opponents a false sense of security that they're able to land punches, but in actual effect, if you guys actually play chess, which watch these Ukrainians and Russians do, it's just you're kind of hanging the rope out, thinking that you're gonna be hanging yourself, but in fact you're leading them down the different path in which you can actually land your attacks later on. So you're studying, you're looking at the patterns, you're testing the power, you're looking at the speed, you're looking at the combination. Are they varying the speed of their punches? Are they setting any traps? And that's what Vasiliy tends to do, but he starts to land the body shots from generally around 3. So it's reconnaissance, then he's probing, then he's beginning to land the body, then he starts that phase of actually accelerating, breaking down the opponent, and then finally he's looking to knock them out. So it's always a multi-phased attack. But in this fight, Vasiliy literally had to go from reconnaissance. There really wasn't too much of the probing or the breaking down. Eventually, he had to go from reconnaissance to start sort of dominating and trying to knock Teofimo down. So that also puts a great deal of pressure on Vasiliy, because he doesn't really have a lot of time, and he must know that he's probably behind the 8 ball. He's already expressed early on that it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Top Rank are looking to put the belts on Teofimo. So he's not averse to that sort of strategy. So he knows he's probably going to have to maybe get multiple knockdowns or try and even knock him out late. And credit to him, he definitely went to war in the latter rounds. He was definitely trying to win the fight. So all of those vehemently sort of deplorable people out there who are criticizing him, saying that it was a pathetic performance or whatever, there's not really too much you can respond to these absolute idiots who clearly don't understand boxing, never really taken heavy punches of a harder, much bigger fighter as well, so don't understand the difficulties and
sorry for cutting you off.
It's not easy. You're trying to get a fighter who's in the prime years of his life, in his 20s, a very athletically gifted fighter who's tough as well, resilient, So it's not a straightforward sort of objective in trying to knock him out. But credit to Vasiliy, they were both trading, they were both tired as well. The body punches were definitely had an effect on Vasiliy as well. A couple of low punches as well, which he sort of induced as well. So Vasiliy was tired. He was gasping as well. Teofimo perhaps got his second wind a lot earlier as well, which allowed him to maybe come back a little bit in some of the rounds and start trading as well. But it was a very, very exciting, second half of the fight. I don't know, official. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, in fact, I have a lot of more things to say. Hating on Loma, and I mean, and those people are behaving as if they're playing a video game, so they don't have in their mind, they don't have that sensibility of them getting hurt. They're only behaving like as if they were playing Fight Night Champion on PS4 or something. But yeah, I would agree that I was hoping for Loma to go for broke a round or two earlier. In that case, I would surely have him winning 7-8 rounds. he waited for too long, but however he was really tentative, because that power of Teofimo and constantly aiming his body whenever he was in front of him, in that space in front of Teofimo Lopez, was a real danger for Loma. Now, yes, at the same time, I would agree that he should have started a round or two earlier. Uh, but you know what? I have to talk about how this fight went. Exactly about his footwork. I was expecting him to use the different kind of footwork and do the different things. Now, unless I'm missing something, um, I was I was negatively surprised that he was not using Teofimo getting out of position, especially when he was throwing those body punches, lunging forward. Now, Teofimo was never a guy like, a guy we covered in the previous fight, Navarrete, who I told you, Navarrete, he can throw a wild punch, get off balance, but at the same time, he's setting a trap to catch you with another punch after that, and Navarrete is able to do that, but not Teofimo. No, yeah, Loma, it also took him long because he was clearly expecting, and it was the case, it happened that way, so Loma was right in that regard, because he was waiting for Teofimo to lose not only the steam, to take the steam of Teofimo's punches, but also for Teofimo to lose the form of his punches, form of his defense. And it really started happening. It's just that at the end, Lomachenko was tired as well, man. Especially in the later rounds, I seen him pushing really hard to fight Teofimo at closer range, but I saw that he was really tired, probably because of those body punches. But to get back to Loma's footwork, the fight I was expecting to see before this fight was for Loma to be more fleet-footed, to really concentrate, especially in the earlier rounds, because in the earlier rounds I was not expecting him to go in straight away. He's a slow starter, we know that, but still, what I was expecting from Loma was to use a lot of in and out movement. Now, what he was doing, he was just moving away from Teofimo's punches without capitalizing on Teofimo getting off balance. Now, that being said, unless I'm missing something, but I really thought that if he tried to be more fleet-footed, if he had a different game plan, he may have won a couple of early rounds and couple of clear early rounds if he tried to counter him more, to get him off balance and counter his counter. But yeah, much easier said than done.
You know what, official?
And yeah,
something you mentioned that I agree. Now, whenever fighters have tried to get lead foot position on Vasiliy, what does Vasiliy do to try and neutralize that almost instantly? And that is, he switches stances, which is the best weapon to anybody who has lead foot position on you. And that's what he could have done a lot more going to orthodox. Because if Teofimo is cutting off his space, forcing him back in straight lines, and then effectively stopping him pivot off to the right, so you're forcing Vasiliy to move to his left, and that goes into Teofimo's right hand, and he's able to hit the body because Vasiliy is just trying to get the fuck out of dodge. So if you go to an orthodox position, then it clearly opens up, his straight right hand, and Vasiliy does have a hard straight right hand, and that is one position in which he could have countered Teofimo's sort of left hook. But he didn't do enough of that, and that to me was a little bit of a surprise. And the other surprise to me was that Richard Comer was able to counter Teofimo's jab from round one, and that is what led to Teofimo making the adjustment as I mentioned last week in the fight, the one punch that Kosei kept landing against Teofimo in the first round was a counter right hand. He would slip Teofimo's jab, slip to the outside, come back with a straight right hand, and it would keep landing. But the problem was that Richard Kosei was a little bit too far away, so he was hyperextending. Now, when Kosei was throwing that right hand, Teofimo, in one of the screenshots I looked at, if you look down, he could see that Kosei's left hand was nowhere near his chin. So he was putting everything into the counter right hand, but he wasn't protecting his chin. So very good reconnaissance there from Teofimo. So in the second round, Richard Kosei was very buoyant by his success in the first round. So he came in a little bit closer. Teofimo actually set that trap for him in his own adversity of getting, hit with that counter right hand in the first round. So Kosei is a little bit closer because he was hyperextending. So Teofimo just simply feinted with the upper body. Kosei is thinking, here we go. The jab is coming. I'm going to counter right it straight away. But Teofimo gets prime position on the outside, knowing that when Kosei throws that straight right hand, his chin is unprotected, and then bang, lands that right hand on Kosei's chin. So it wasn't a case of two guys just trading right hands in isolation. It was actually very good IQ, boxing IQ, ring IQ from Teofimo Lopez. So we've given him actually credit for having very good boxing skills for a 23-year-old. But my point is that if Richard Kosei is able to counter in an orthodox position Teofimo's jab, then that is something Vasiliy. I was thinking maybe he should have gone the orthodox, and I felt he could have definitely done that with his own right hand. But very surprised for such a fluid switch hitter who has that ability. But these days he tends to use the switch hitting more from a defensive posture as opposed to making that adjustment from a countering the counter to get not only the lead foot position back, but if he's having problems with somebody who's got maybe perhaps a longer reach, then he can just change that angle. But he couldn't do that. He couldn't get any angles on the early part of the attack, and he was just rotating, moving laterally in the wrong position. And it was a bit of a surprise to me, official.
Yeah, definitely. Look, when I was saying you remember very well, and all of you remember that before the fight, I was expecting Loma to be a terrible matchup for Teofimo Lopez. And judging by all the previous fights that Teofimo had before fighting Lomachenko, it was really looking like that. Now, what Teofimo did in this fight, this means he looked like a different fighter, because we never saw him do those things. Although many of those things, a lot of things that he had success with, to be honest, without trying to, anyways, we got our prediction wrong, it's sure, but almost all the things we said Teofimo would have to do against Loma, he was doing it, and I'll get to it a bit later. But yeah, before the fight, I was saying that Loma was a terrible stylistic matchup for Teofimo, and it's because we never saw in Teofimo's previous fights, and I watched almost all of his fights that I could find online, even months ago when this fight was initially announced. He was never doing some things that he was doing, and it means that Teofimo and his team did a really wonderful homework on Lomachenko, and had the right game plan, and they implemented Teofimo was using his physical advantages very smartly, and big credit for him for that. Now, yeah, the thing is, like I said,
and also official, he's great points there. Also, he's somebody who's been prone to panic attacks, asthma attacks. So mentally there were some questions as well, but he looked very composed in his ring walk, looked very composed backstage. There was definitely a possibility that the fight mentally could have been very difficult for him. A very young man doesn't clearly have the level of experience. Vasily's only really lost one championship tournament in his entire career and one professional fight, highly controversially. So clearly a man who is not fazed by the big fight occasion or the pressures that are associated with championship fights, having fought champion after champion and free weight categories. But it was very impressive from Teofimo that he didn't capitulate.
Yes, that's true. Even mentally, he showed up to be stronger than at least me myself I expected him to be. So a lot of credit to him in that sense, in that regard as well. But yeah, I mean, look, his stamina, I still do think that he would be tired if Lomachenko was more nimble on his feet, because for me one of the reasons Teofimo he ultimately did get tired, but was able to withstand Loma's attacks, but he was not as tired as I would expect him, also because in the first 6 rounds Loma was allowing him to breathe. Yeah, Loma was making a miss and tire himself out, but not enough. I still think if Loma started fighting at a high pace earlier, because you could see any of the rounds that Loma won, he won it with a very high pace, and he was able to beat Teofimo to the punch every time in those rounds with high activity. So I think that if Loma was boxing that way for a couple of, if he started boxing that way a couple of rounds earlier, he would be able to deplete Teofimo's stamina even more. Now I want to say something about the commentary team and scorecards, and keep in mind, this has nothing to do with Teofimo, because anyone listening to this podcast, to this episode, can clearly hear me giving Teofimo a lot of props. So with that being said, I'm not trying to shit on Teofimo. It has nothing to do with him, like I said. But scorecards, of course, they were terrible. I don't want to waste my breath on them. However, I was telling you right before the show, imagine if we were all agreeing, if the scenario was a bit different, and in the eyes of all the boxing fans, imagine if Loma clearly won 8 or 9 rounds with those scorecards that we saw the last night, and having it extremely close fight, 6-6 in rounds. Even if Loma was able to clearly win 8 or 9 rounds, he would, in my opinion, still get robbed. So I think that
on Julie Lederman's scorecard, even if Vasily had 2 knockdowns, he still would have lost the fight, which is absolutely absurd.
Exactly. And I think I lost my train of thoughts, but hold on. But anyways, okay, before I try to remember what I wanted to add
the
about
commentary team you were mentioning.
Yep. I cannot really remember, but I can go on about the commentary team. They were very also one-sided. I mean, Teofimo, yeah, he was doing a better job, but even when Loma was doing really great job, they were not calling punches, etc. So, but I'm not trying to shit on Teofimo once again. It's just that it made following the broadcast really hard for some of us. I was really, I was really mad at it. And scorecards, yeah, I mean, look, seeing the scorecards that we got last night, it really explains that Loma was right in some sense about really trying to knock Teofimo out, to stop him. In that sense, he really was right about taking too many rounds away, too many early rounds, half of the fight, in order to try to come strong in the second half of the fight and try to stop Teofimo. So that's the reason why he was really negative in the first half of the fight, which again there are. I still gave you, how do you say it? I also gave you the reasons why it was wrong for him, but ultimately, I don't want to shit on Loma, because you can see what he was trying to do, especially seeing those scorecards. And even right after Teofimo stopped Richard Comey, Lom on his own YouTube page was being interviewed and said the same thing about him believing that his promoter would want the younger Teofimo, who speaks English, who's very braggadocious, exciting, 22, 23 years old, to win the fight. But that's those things that I'm saying, though. It's not a knock on Teofimo, because he did extremely well in this fight, more than I expected. But it's about the bias and the reason that you really can't really enjoy boxing, especially if you're listening to the commentary. So definitely a clear sign that you have to mute the fight and not even pay too much attention to scorecards, because that's another reason that I cannot take seriously even corruption, even many of our friends who are like, even when they see a robbery, and then they're talking about who's a better fighter than who, they still they're still basing their opinions on the official scorecards, although they're admitting that there are clear robberies. They still they're taking them into consideration, and that's terrible. But once again, to close this part of the show where I was talking about the bias in the media and American boxing establishment, it's not an knock on Teofimo, it's a knock on bias boxing establishment.
Officially, you only had to hear Joe Tessitore's words when the announcement was made. It was immediately the American-born fighter. So there was a clear. They wanted to make that demarcation straight away and claim him as one of their own, but they'll use the Latino card whenever they're going to try and promote the fight or appeal to that sort of demographic. So we know the typical sort of marketing strategy which they employ, and they're never going to have a Ukrainian who doesn't speak English as the face of boxing, or as somebody who can, take the sport forward. When you look at the racial tensions that are already emanating around the world, etc., so are we really going to have a Ukraine? To me, it was almost mutually exclusive. But that's the sad, that it leads a sickening feeling in the pit of the stomach when somebody like Vasiliy Lomachenko, who is a bastion of the sport, somebody who he's made history, so he has to go down as one of the greatest, because look at his amateur record and look at his professional. He's the first fighter to be a free world champion in the least number of fights. So it's not a case that he's emulated somebody. He is surpassing those records. So he has to go down as one of the greatest ever. But boxing is not reciprocating that to him, and we saw with the Orlando Salido fight, and we're seeing that in this, and we saw that with the absolutely ridiculous. I lost a tremendous amount of respect for Steve Weisfeld, who isn't that bad, but is certainly prone to some of these absolutely ridiculous scorecards. And Julie Lederman, well, clearly she needs to be joining her father, and getting the fuck off this planet, because she's got no business adjudicating fights whatsoever. Vasiliy has not even had a fight in the Ukraine. So he's based his entire career in the United States. So when these fighters make this sort of sacrifice, you're learning a new language, you're basing your training camp, you're moving your family here, not a permanent sort of migration, but you're spending a great deal of time here. You're trying to get within the culture, the structure, and the fabric of US boxing. So you cannot say that he hasn't tried to integrate himself, and you reward these peoples with these sort of officiating like that, not showing him absolutely any respect. And that is, for me, is really the thing that is the component that really sickens me to my back stomach. How many other fighters, official, who, giving away all of the physical advantages, are 9 years older, fighting in the weight category which is clearly above his prime sort of optimum sort of 126, 130, but he couldn't get those fighters, shitting in their pants, didn't want to fight him whatsoever. So he's having to come up to lightweight, fighting fighters who are 135 pounds, rehydrating to 150. Fighters who are 5 feet 10, 5 feet 9 should be fighting at maybe 140, 147. But what is Vasiliy doing? He's not running, or maybe in the early part, but he's going to war and he's trying to win the fight. He's stepping it to them. And how many other fighters can you out there are showing that they're prepared to go to war and win the fight and take punishment, take some punches to give their own punishment? There's hardly any fighters out there who are willing to, step into the lion's den under those sort of circumstances. So you've got to give Vasiliy, a tremendous amount of respect, whether in defeat or whether you felt that, he won the fight. He was definitely there to win the fight, and is a great fighter, and he's one of the greatest fighters of all time. Simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Look, I have to give a big up to recognize the Matrix from BDA, who once again mentioned something, and big credit for him for that, for saying that it's very easy to hate on Loma, those who have a bias against him, and some of the Eastern Europeans, because Loma is a fighter who's definitely going to give you that opportunity to hate on him, because he's a much, like you said, much smaller fighter who would still never duck a fighter, and he will give those big, huge fighters the opportunity to prove him wrong, and to ultimately for Loma's haters to laugh at Loma, and Loma's fans to hate on us, so it's really easy, because Loma is never backing down. He gets every opportunity, no matter how big it is. Now, definitely, look, I would say in his pro career, his problem is definitely he didn't have an all-time great, maybe except Teofimo. Maybe he's a future all-time great. You never know, and I'll get into it in just a second. But first, I'm gonna mention that in his era, there was no all-time great fighter that up till now that was willing to face him. Especially in his more natural weight classes. So yeah, you can say he doesn't have a great name, winning against a great name on his resume. But however, He really fought extremely good fighters who were, by the way, much bigger than him, above his natural weight class. Because remember, before shitting on Lomachenko, you have to consider that he started his pro career very, very late. So it means, imagine, like I said in the last episode, if he started his pro career at 18, 20 years old, he would be remembered as probably 126 weight class fighter, maybe 130. But even at 130, where he was doing extremely amazing job, he was still fighting against the bigger guys than him, people who would rehydrate much more than him. So those are all the things that you have to consider before hating on Lomachenko. And plus, look, he was a smaller fighter dealing with most of his opponents as if they were children, man. Um, and he was doing, and the reason for him, despite not having all-time great wins against all-time great opponents, are that he was really treating them as they were levels below him. So yeah, you have to consider that.
All right. What about what's next for both fighters, and not necessarily what they're gonna do? What ideally is a scenario what you would like to see? Um, Vasily, does he remain at 135 pounds? Would you like him to stay there? Maybe he's talked about, Tank Davis in the past, but Tank Davis will clearly he'll get a little bit more exciting after the result of this fight, because clearly their strategy has been one of procrastination. The same thing that Floyd Mayweather did to Manny Pacquiao. Um, you know, the same thing that Canelo Alvarez did to Gennady Golovkin. Um,
Exactly.
you're going to wait for these guys who are already veterans. Once the wear and tear starts, the degradation of their physical attributes starts to go, then there's maybe an opportunity that they're more vulnerable, and that's when you're going to pounce on them. So it's one of these bitch ass tactics that we see in boxing. Once upon a time, fighters used to fight in the fucking ring. Now they fight on Twitter and social media. It's a whole bunch of pussies out there. Yet they're giving, people like Vasily and sort of Usyk, a lot of grief for just getting out of their comfort zones and challenging, behemoths or bigger fighters whatsoever. So too many motherfuckers out there who just, need to be decapitated. So what would you like to see, official?
Look, I will, and even Teofimo himself, we were all able to hear him in just in the last few days, uh, talking about Lomachenko earlier, saying that he may go back down to 130. Clearly, going back to 130 would be a great move for him. Now, but despite that, I would still like to see a rematch. I'm not saying that he would that he would necessarily win a rematch against Teofimo, who may get even better, who clearly got a lot of confidence after this fight. So maybe you can say in a possible rematch, although I'm aware that there is no rematch clause and that Teofimo is aiming to move up to 140. Let's say if there was a rematch, I would say Loma still stands a really great chance of winning against him. Now, if he loses the rematch, well, again, I would say you tried two times against Teofimo, so respect. It didn't work out, so it doesn't matter. But the reason for me saying that I believe he would stand a great chance of winning the rematch was that this time he would be already aware that he cannot start this late, and he would sell out much much sooner in the fight. He would started working much sooner, and so yeah, maybe in the process he would, unlike in this fight, maybe he would get knocked out. In the 12th round. He was repeatedly cut with like three straight counter right hands to the face cleanly, and I was amazed that he buckled, and Teofimo buckled him a couple of times in the fight. But Loma was doing, was really hurting in the second half of the fight. Almost every round, he had a chance to get Teofimo out of there. Now, yeah,
If anybody was close to being knocked out, it was Teofimo. He was hurt more in the fight. Clearly, there's no dispute there.
absolutely, absolutely, and I was really excited. I thought that it's about any time from here now on, he's going to stop him, and it looked that way. He was close to doing that, but yeah, beside the rematch with Teofimo, of course, he could fight Tank Davis, who may finally muster some courage to face him after this last fight. But yeah, it would be smart also to move back down. Maybe try to fight Teofimo once more, or try to get Tank in the ring with him. If not, to move back down. Yeah, man, I'm sure there are many things that I want to say that I'm going to forget, because I really had a lot of things to say about this fight. I may just add one or two things. I think that, look, it's already, people started hating on predictions on predictions that all of us had. Most of us was predicting that Loma would win, and but still, what gets on my nerves is, like we said in the previous show, it's not about you picking Teofimo to beat him. It's just not giving. No one ever gave us the exact scenario of how Teofimo is going to beat him, except for us on this show, I think. Some other people.
A lot of people taking credit for predicting Teofimo by knockout, but that was not the correct prediction in the slightest.
Yeah, and
no knockouts. So that was just wishful thinking.
Absolutely corruption. And one more thing is that still, beside that, of course, as you can see, we were wrong about our prediction. But we already spoke about everything that Teofimo should do in order to hurt Loma and to win the fight. And I was talking about him being able to catch Magdaleno a couple of times with the right hand, predicting and timing Magdaleno going to the blind angle, stepping to the blind angle, and he was doing that same thing against Loma. Only that he was not doing it with the straight right hand, but with the uppercut. In fact, it was the thing I was expecting Jamal Charlo to do against Derevyanchenko as well. But Teofimo definitely had more success with his right uppercut, timing Lomachenko stepping to the blind angle with the right uppercut than Jamal could do against Derevyanchenko. But not only that, we also saw him kind of like Butaev against Besputin that I already mentioned. I cannot remember because look, I was speaking on our show, on my own channel. I appeared a couple of times recently on Unrivaled Boxing Tokyo News, and I was mentioning all of these things. That Teofimo, he was waiting many times. He was timing also Loma stepping to the blind angle with a left hook to the body, and he landed a couple of those left hooks to the body with Loma stepping in sideways, timing him and hurting him pretty bad. I'm sure there are many other things that I mentioned that I saw in the fight. Teofimo doing it. So my only surprise is that Teofimo was able to do better than I expected him to do. And when Jimmy on Unravel Boxing Talking News asked us, would you, despite picking Loma, would you be surprised if Teofimo wins this fight? I said no. So yeah, and plus those hating on our predictions and on Loma are also taking away from Teofimo, because Teofimo not only hold on, let me gather my thoughts. Teofimo only did better than I expected him to do, and he was indeed doing the exact things that you and me said before this fight that he should try to do against Vasiliy Lomachenko.
Exactly, walking him down on the front foot. That's exactly what we said. That's his best strategy to employ, to bully Vasily and target the body.
Yeah, body punches. We were definitely talking about the body punches and going mixing up punches, his combos up and down, and yeah. And I can even say if we were right about him, he was not. Look, Teofimo was not able to create the occasions coming forward, except for the body shots that Loma was giving him, protecting his chin and his head. But he was doing well at taking the opportunities that Loma was giving him. So I knew that it would be hard, and it was, despite Teofimo doing great, it was hard for him to layer his offense, to set up punches, his offense in that sense. But what he was able to do was to negate Loma's offense and capitalize on the openings that Loma was giving him, not the openings that he was creating, but he was more capitalizing on the openings that Loma was giving him with his style.
All right. Now, Lopez obviously had a massive injection of confidence, buoyant. He's on top of the moon, probably like somebody on crystal meth. He's talking about maybe vacating and going up to 140 pounds and challenging Josh Taylor. Well, I'm not sure whether that's a wise strategy, but what are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I only heard Josh Taylor. So yeah, you're saying about Teofimo possibly facing Josh Taylor in the future.
He's expressed a desire about vacating and moving up and challenging Josh Taylor.
Oh well, yeah, that would be definitely amazing. And being that he's a strong fighter who's training to stay at 135, I would say, look, although Josh Taylor is hell of a fighter, Teofimo would. I mean, I haven't done any study, so don't take serious what I'm saying now. But I definitely think he would stand a chance against Josh Taylor. But the problem is, I don't expect that fight to happen, because I would expect Josh Taylor to move up to 147. I do think that for now, the plan for Bob Arum and Top Rank is to, or maybe you may never know. Maybe it's too late for the Crawford train. Maybe they're realizing it's late for the Crawford train, but I still think that at the moment they're trying to make a big fight between Crawford and Josh Taylor. And Josh Taylor, even right after winning against Regis Prograis, immediately after the fight, he was saying that he's looking to move up, that it's not that easy for him, it's very hard and taxing for his body to make 140. So I absolutely do expect him to move up to 147 very soon, after having the unification fight with Ramirez. I would expect him to go up. Not that it's not that I would
Agreed.
not want him to stay at 140 because it's a really great division, one of the very best divisions in the boxing, and Teofimo Lopez would be amazing addition to that already super strong division and extremely underrated division. So yeah, as a boxing fan, as a hardcore boxing fan, I would perhaps maybe even prefer for Josh Taylor to stay at 140 because the division is so lit, and I think that 147, the current 147, so is good but vastly overrated. But with that being said, it would still be exciting to see how would he fare against the 147 fighters, as mainly Terence Crawford, because that fight would be very easy to make out of all the others 147 possible fights for Josh Taylor. The last episode or 2 episodes ago, we were talking. You was talking about him possibly facing Spence. Not that you were expecting that fight to be made, but you was just giving your thoughts of how that fight could go. So I don't know. I hope I answered your question.
I think in terms of the matchmaking and the next moves for Teofimo, there is some caution from Top Rank because they definitely do have a commodity in which they can nurture, but you've got to be a little bit realistic and pragmatic. Teofimo wasn't exhibiting any revolutionary nuances to what he was doing against Vasiliy. It wasn't anything. There was nothing, no major superlatives in what he was doing. It was just very basic, fundamental big man tactics to bully a fighter. It was nothing.
Corruption. Can I say just one thing? Really sorry for that.
But it was disciplined and there was structure to what he was doing, motive, purpose, and determination. So he was very hungry for success. But you can't just pitch him straight away against Josh Taylor in your first fight. He's got to have some warm up fights, and there's no guarantee that he even beats somebody like Jose Zepeda, who is a tremendous boxer puncher. I've always said that. I've liked him from day one. You underestimate his power at your peril, and you get sent to the afterlife. And just ask Ivan Baranchik that. He can fight in different ways. So if he has to get aggressive, then he will do, and we saw in that fight. So there's no guarantee. People like Regis Prograis at 140 pounds. There's no guarantee that Teofimo beats him. Certainly not immediately. But he's a little bit impatient. But maybe that's not a bad criticism. He wants to fight the top fighter straight away. You can't blame him for that. But as a manager and as a matchmaker and a promoter, you've got to say, look, we do have to exercise a little bit of patience here. You're only 23. You've shown some new skills certainly in this fight. So there is, unlike Deontay Wilder, there is a vessel in which we can educate, nurture, and your skill set can improve. So, Joey Gamache doesn't look like a bad secondary or an ancillary sort of trainer with him. A very good fighter. So clearly, they did. They analyzed the deficiencies and what they could exploit and what they could. So clearly, that in amidst the chaos with his father, who acts as the foil for sort of Joey Gamache, there is, Teofimo is clearly listening, and he said that in the past that his father doesn't switch off. Maybe he has a better rapport with Joey. I don't know. I don't really know the dynamics between the relationship. But clearly, he's observing and he's implementing the instructions. So it is a working relationship. So there are improvements. He can definitely improve, certainly on the inside as well. His combination punching and his defense definitely has to improve. He definitely gets hit to head and body far too much, and under pressure, as we saw from round 6 onwards, And clearly his conditioning can improve as well. And his conditioning is definitely correlated to the amount of weight he's losing. He's synonymous with being a party goer. He's already admitted to doing so, but he's a very young man. So you're going to go out, partying. He's recently married, so you're going to enjoy life as well. So it's finding that balance, getting to the correct weight, working with strength and conditioners, working with a dietitian, not ballooning up too much in between fights. So he's not utilizing his training camps as just curtailing 20, 25, 30 pounds. If you can get it down to around sort of 15, within 8 weeks, which is a reasonable sort of parameter, that's good. He'll only get better. He's not even got his man strength yet. So there is absolutely a lot of upside to Teofimo Lopez, and at the simultaneously Top Rank can promote him. They can get him on all of these ESPN, God knows whatever, all of these US shows, whatever. He appeals definitely to the younger generation in which we see. So maybe they can, bankroll on his name, get him onto ESPN Plus as a pay-per-view star, whatever else. So yeah, there is potential in the Teofimo Lopez sort of commodity status. So we'll see, going forward. But in terms of Vasiliy, I'm not too sure. I think he's too much weight in his upper body, and there's not as much dexterity in his legs, and that is clearly evident. He's not using that T shuffle that he does from sort of side to side, up and down. There's not that much spring in his step, and there's not that explosiveness in his footwork and his ability to just sort of switch left and right very quickly at that sort of shorter range in which he likes to fight. So maybe it's a combination of too much weight, too much upper body weight, that coupled with sort of age, wear and tear as well. So much like Manny Pacquiao, who started transitioning, developing his right hand, and he transitioned into a very good sort of boxer puncher, very good counter puncher as well. So maybe, Vasiliy, I think, definitely has all of the skills and the ring IQ to do that as well. So it may be that, his work rate is not going to be as dominating as, high tempo sort of all action at the second half of the fight. So maybe he has to try and maybe box a little bit more, and he can definitely do so. He clearly has power at 135 pounds. He's pretty much dropped everybody at 135 with the exception of Teofimo. So clearly does have punching power. And at 130, we know that he retired a hell of a lot of good fighters as well. So he definitely does have punching power, and even punching power as well. So it's not all doom and gloom for him. I don't have a problem with him going back down to 130 if that's his proclivity. There are fights for him at 135 pounds if he decides to stay there. If a Devin Haney or whatever, he's been a lot of trash talking now, talking about Vasiliy being, a bum whatsoever. So, Vasiliy definitely has some scores to settle with him. That's a fight I wouldn't mind should that happen at 135. Although I can't see Devin Haney and his father entertaining that fight now that there's the risk and the return sort of ratio is systematically changed. So, Devin Haney does a hell of a lot of talking. He's either going to fight Teofimo. They've talked about that he doesn't really want to fight brawlers, which is pretty much his euphemism for saying that he doesn't want to fight a puncher. So there's a hell of a lot of bullshit out there. I don't know.
Yeah, I would like to.
I think for Vasiliy Lomachenko and Miguel Berchelt, it's the fight for me. Miguel has he's hooted he's hidden in that secludity and the sort of anonymity of sort of Mexico, and he's got away with doing a lot of talking and pretty much not fighting anybody whatsoever. Made a lot of aspersions that he's going to be fighting, unifying belts, and he's had opportunities to do so, but he, at his own volition, he rejected those fights. I don't know. He's looking to fight Oscar Valdez instead of the other top ranked fighter who holds the the IBF belt. So I don't know with Miguel. It's very hard to see what Zanfer Promotions are sort of projecting with him. Very disappointing in what he's done thus far. Just beating washed up fighters one after the other. Fighting rematches with Francisco Vargas, totally unnecessary. Fighting a Jason Sosa who's washed up, been beaten, stopped, beaten down. Was a good fighter back in the day, not disputing that at all. But now an Oscar Valdez who's showing a great deal of vulnerabilities. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to project the future for Vasily, but I think he definitely has opportunities both at 135. But I think 130 is the right weight category for him. That's in sort of sync with his natural sort of body weight as well. I think he'll be far more. He'll have that flexibility and the agility in his footwork as well. He may not get any better, but I think the degradation will be far less at 130 than it will at 135 pounds, where power is definitely, power and size are definitely factors that are giving him a great deal of trouble at 135. When we saw that in various elements in the sort of the Pedraza and the Luke Campbell and the Jorge Linares fight, but it was more apparent and more acute in the Teofimo Lopez fight. So it's going to be difficult for him. So I'm not. If he wants to go down to 130 pounds, I've got no problem. He's been a freeweight world champion. Maybe the belts, maybe Lopez vacates, the belts get split up, so he has a chance of fighting for undisputed, gathering the belts up again. So anything is possible. There's a hell of a lot of scenarios, but yeah, it was a damn decent fight. I definitely enjoyed it. Very pissed off with the scorecards, but for me, I felt nobody won the fight. I felt it was 6 rounds apiece. I think it's a fair decision. So I think that's about as much as we're going to cover as an immediate sort of reaction to this particular fight. It's been a very long night, long morning. Haven't really seen the fight again. Haven't got a great deal of sleep as well. But I think we'll talk a little bit about one of the other fights that was on the card.
Sorry, corruption. I would like to add
at 140 pounds. Alex Saucedo was fighting an undefeated fighter in Arnold Barboza Jr. and a very good fight, very good scrap. Bad blood between the two fighters beforehand. Barboza was, looking for respect, trying to win the respect of Saucedo, and I think he definitely accomplished that. Top Rank think very highly of him, and we can see he has multi dimensions to his game. He can fight at the different sort of ranges. A very explosive combination punch. I like it when he gets down low, comes back with that left, right, left, then comes up top with a left, right, left as well. So he can fire off a whole tranche of very quick combinations, changing levels as well. So he's not just doing the punches from a sort of a crouched position to catch a fighter if they're coming head and body. Conversely, if they're trying to counter him as well. So, but Alex Saucedo clearly doesn't know how to fight from the outside. You can see at long range, he's not even firing off any sort of jabs or, straight right hands whatsoever. And he does have the height to do so, but he clearly wants to start engaging and trading. But once Barboza stopped fucking around in switching stances, which he was doing initially, which didn't give him absolutely any advantages whatever. Once he gauged that, and he fought in his natural sort of stance and was able to establish a good rhythm. Yeah, he was able to pick his punches at will, trade heavy lever on the inside, both of them, but he was much better at long range, at sort of mid range. Better combination puncher, had the faster hands, had the better defense. Saucedo defense is pretty non-existent, taking too many punches flush. That's already shortened his career thus far up until now, and with that Lenny Z fight and fights like this, that's only going to accelerate his retirement. But we saw a little kind of an interesting dynamic where they used the video technology for the first time, and a knockdown which was ruled a slip, and we saw Joe Cortez review that particular. I think it was at the end of the 748th round. I can't remember exactly, but Barboza threw a wild punch, was off balance and sort of on his back foot, and Saucedo definitely connected with a punch. May not have been too hard, but it was definitely a punch which caused the knockdown. And Joe Cortez reviewed it and in real time, so there was not in between the sort of rounds, so a good use of technology to sort of annul an initial decision by the referee. So in the end, the knockdown wasn't too significant. Pretty wide margins for Barboza, who now gets into, I'm not sure whether he's in the mandatory position, but he's definitely thereabouts with most of the ranking, with most of the sanctioning bodies, and good little fighter official. I'm not sure whether you saw the fight. I've seen too much of his previous fights, but definitely some skills that Barboza has.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I was watching the fight, but I was not paying too much attention. Barboza really clearly made a difference once he really decided to prolong the range at which he was fighting Saucedo. I was glad that they were utilizing the technology to review. Was it to make a decision, was it a knockdown or not? I think that's a really good thing for boxing, that it should have been implemented a long time ago. But to be honest with you, I was so hyped up, so into Loma versus Teofimo fight, that I was not really trying to pay attention to what was happening in the ring. Same for the fight before that one, between the Puerto Rican guy. I forgot his name. Berlanga, and the other fight, the other 10-rounder, which was really good.
Former lieutenant of Fidel Castro, Edgar Rabenga.
Sorry for that. Yeah, but even that fight, the fight that happened right before Berlanga versus Saucedo, it was a really nice fight, but I was not paying really a lot of attention to them because I was so hyped up about the main event. But anyways, let me know if you wanted to say some more on those other fights or not, because later I can wait, but I would have to make another 3 points, 3 more points, 3 last points about the Loma Teofimo fight. But I can wait if you want to go on to.
No, no, you can proceed. The Belenga
Mhm.
fight. Not a lot to say there. I mean, if you had gauged the odds on a first round knockout, which was extraordinary, then a pretty easy pick to make, and definitely a heavy-handed fighter, but not a great deal. I've got to give him respect that he did knock out a fighter who I think previously hadn't been stopped before. It's going to be difficult to find opponents for him the way he is just dissecting them in one round, and Top Rank are clearly marketing him as this 15 straight first round knockout. So it's a great way of getting some casual fans, or getting some interest on some of the undercards. As you mentioned, a lot of people are not even paying attention to the Saucedo fights whatsoever, but it's always nice to get some knockdowns in your appetizers before the sort of main card. So he's a perfect addition to some of these, to the way that they configure these cards for some of these high level fights. But that was the only two fights I saw on the undercard. So no, nothing from me on the rest of it. So you can proceed on to the two other points you wanted to make.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so look, I already told everyone on the other channel that I don't really like making pound for pound lists, especially top 10. Now with well, again, it depends on how you score the fight between Loma and Teofimo, but you can make the case that for sure that Loma is not pound for pound number one. It depends, but on the other hand, if like us, you had him going 6-6 against Teofimo, against a much bigger fighter, I still don't see no reason for you to keep him there, because he was fighting. We were expecting him to fight a very good fighter, but see, in fact, my problem with pound for pound lists is that people, anytime there is so when pound for pound fighter lose without necessarily having without necessarily being outboxed or outfought, I think that people are quick to denigrate them. I'm not saying I would have to think, because first of all, I don't like making powerful pound lists, but and I would have to consider who would be my current number one after this fight. But one thing I have to stress on about people who are about to change their lists is that people should look at this as basketball, meaning if you're having a lead of 20 plus points against the opponent team, so if your opponent score a 3-pointer or scores even 7-8 points in a row, it doesn't necessarily mean that that you're losing the fight. So in that regard, it, to me personally, doesn't necessarily mean that having a tough fight but close fight at the same time against Teofimo doesn't necessarily mean that people should absolutely drop Loma out of their number one spot. Of course, you can make a great case that he isn't a number one fighter anymore, but and I don't have a clear opinion on it. I'm just telling people in advance that they should consider those things. Now, it's funny you were mentioning Burchelt. It's funny and at the same time really depressing that Burchelt was clearly the one saying that he doesn't want to unify, and me and you, we never spoke about the possible fight between Berchelt and Vasiliy Lomachenko. But corruption, I'm pretty sure that we are along the same lines when that we have a similar opinion on that possible fight, and that is that Berchelt would be an extremely tough fight. The way Teofimo fought Lomachenko was kind of the style I would expect Berchelt to fight Teofimo. To fight Loma. So it could be a very, very hard fight, another hard fight for Loma. It's just so disappointing that he refused to unify with Loma, that he was content with making his defenses against nobodies, because he really has the potential to do the same thing that Teofimo was able to do to Loma, except, of course, those are not exactly the same fighters, and Berchelt is probably much more opened up, for Loma's offense as well. But it would be hell of a fight if it happened. But my very last point about Loma versus Teofimo, look, the outcome of this fight. Was all about two things. One thing is that we were not getting the usual Loma, his usual style, the style we were expecting him to use against Teofimo. But it is understandable that seeing the scorecards, it's pretty clear that he was looking to take Teofimo in deep waters and stop him in the championship rounds. So we were not expecting Loma to use that game plan, but he was not foolish for using it. But the outcome, we got that outcome because of the change in Loma's game plan, as well as because Teofimo showed us some things that we never saw him doing against his previous opponents. So I think that before the fight, we were expecting a small, great fighter to fight a very good, bigger fighter and employ a different game plan. So that's why we were picking Loma to win, but not knowing that Teofimo is a step above. I mean, it ended up to be a great small fighter against a great big fighter at the end. So that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And something regarding this whole toxic discussion regarding pound for pound rankings and every motherfucker on the planet having their own criteria, and that's all we hear about. It's really is one of the most annoying debates to have. But if you interpret the true essence of what the pound for pound rankings is, from my observations, there isn't a clear number one position anymore. And Terence Crawford, his argument for having that, the number one position is no less any stronger. Because if you're not fighting at your natural weight class for the first 7 years, and if you try and emulate what Vasiliy Lomachenko did, then clearly Terence Bud Crawford, who is a very talented fighter, has to get out of his comfort zone, get out of his weight category, and he has to win belts at 154 pounds, up against live dogs, undefeated fighters in their prime. And that for me is what effectively Vasiliy has been doing at 135 pounds. Maybe not undefeated fighters in their prime, but fighting whoever is the best. Mikey Garcia clearly didn't want the fight, and he vacated two of the belts to go to 147. Otherwise, that fight would have happened. So it's not down to Vasiliy saying that, look, I'm going to vacate and I'm going to go get the fuck out of here and go down to 130. You know, they were playing poker, and Mikey clearly, you know, he submitted his hand, and he left the fucking weight categories. So that's, can't blame Vasiliy. He's beaten whoever was there or fought anybody. So Bud Crawford, what is he doing now? He's fighting, you know, Kell Brook. Once upon a time, a very good fighter, but UK fight fans have been kind of hoping for Kell Brook and Amir Khan. You know, this whole merry-go-dance between these two fighters. You know, they should have fought 6-7 years ago, whatever. Maybe they can fight now, two washed-up fighters just looking for their one last big payday. You know, Kell Brook doesn't know whether he's heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual. You know, is he 154? Is he a 147 pound fighter? You know, he's masquerading as 147, but he's clearly not. You know, what's happening to his cocaine habit, which has been problematic for him, you know, and Bud Crawford is fighting him now. So is that the level of competition that a incontrovertible pound for pound number one fighter, is that the level of competition that he attains to? So for me, there is no outright decisive pound for pound number one fighter, and that's fine. There's a lot of fighters who can potentially have an argument for that or can elevate themselves. Naoya Inoue is definitely one fighter who can perhaps move into contention if he becomes, you know, undisputed at sort of bantamweight, which he's been trying to do. Hopefully John Riel Casimero will grow some balls and get in the ring with him. And there are other fighters, you know, but the PBC are clearly going to be lobbying for a number of their fighters to be included within the top 10, and they're going to be definitely lobbying and sending, you know, tubes of Vaseline and wire payments, you know, going to all of these conventions, and they're going to be lobbying for their fighters, you know, Jamal Charlo to be, you know, included pretty high up in the top 10 categories. And I'm pretty sure that the financial power of persuasion that they've been able to exercise, as we've seen it for a number of years, you've only got to look at them, you know, the mandatory fighters, and you've got to clearly look at, you know, how many of these WBC champions have undertaken any clean boxing testing, despite, you know, that being represented as part of the WBC's own unique mandate, which other, you know, sanctioning bodies are emulating. But we've seen none of that. So the level of corruption is absolutely pervasive, and that's what happens at all of these conventions. That's when all the deals and all the backhanders and all the, you know, all of the wire payments and all of the shell corporations are all set up, and monies are tabulated, and fighters are promoted to mandatory berths, or fighters are able to get their mandatories, you know, extended or cancelled. So it's going to be interesting, but I'm clearly anticipating a lot of the PBC fighters to be elevated within the top 10, and for me it's laughable. So I'm not gonna entertain this topic for too much longer. But so I think from my perspective, official, that pretty much covers the show for this week.
Yeah, I would agree. So, and even what you're saying about, well, earlier you were talking about the bantamweights. Yeah, like you and me were speaking a couple of days ago. It's very sad that the same thing that is happening to those higher weight classes started happening in the bantamweight division, meaning the third parties, meaning the TV networks fucking the things up. Now you have bantamweights going to separate sides, and Casimero, who I do like very much and I respect him. I think he's a tremendous fighter, and another small fighter who's who's doing really great at way higher weight class than his natural weight class. But yeah, and it was funny him calling out Inoue, calling him Japanese turtle, although it's very questionable. Is now Inoue really a turtle, because he's very athletic fighter, very strong, powerful, quick, with great foot movement. But yeah, I think it's fun. It's entertaining for Casimero to call out Inoue, but however, it's clear that he was the one ducking the fight, and it looks like he's trying to save his face. But yeah, I think that's pretty much from us corruption.
Yeah, he's what Casimero is doing. He's advocating the classic PBC strategy of calling out the fighter, and but then he's relying on the Japanese high rollers. You've only got to listen to Gibbons, his manager, and understanding that they're relying specifically on Inoue's large contingency to be the financial sort of backing for the fight, because John Real Casimero doesn't really have a large following in the US. So you're clearly cloud chasing Inoue, and you're using that name to do so, but you're ultimately not going to fight him. So it's already talking about fighting Rigo and possibly Luis Neri at a higher weight, and sort of vacating his title. So we see that all the time with PBC fighters. So that doesn't surprise me whatsoever. So
yeah,
we'll wait,
Casimero in PBC mode.
Yeah, and when we'd speak about pound for pound rankings official, should the winner of Ioka and Tanaka, shouldn't they have a great argument to be, I don't know, somewhere between 8th and maybe 6th in the pound for pound rankings? I think that's a fair. When you're talking about a 4-weight, or if Tanaka wins both of them being 4-weight world champions. So, but that's not going to be reflected in the pound for pound rankings. So Tanaka's already, if he had the 10th berth, they're clearly going to get him out of there and bring Charlo in. So I don't know. Maybe one day I'll converse with some of the ring contingents. I've had discussions with Mike Montero and that in the past, so I'll try and have a conversation with Steve Kim, perhaps even get him on this show, and we'll sit down and go through the criteria.
Yeah, it would be lovely, man, because it's really sad. I mean, you're mentioning Ioka versus Tanaka fight. Well, I'm gonna be even bolder than you, because although I don't like making pound for pound lists, I forced myself to do one, and to me, Tanaka is probably, from what I remember, I had him on my 7th or 8th place, and and Ioka on the 4th or even 3rd place. I cannot remember. I think I had him number 4, then Inoue number 3, but it's debatable. I can even put Ioka over Inoue, in my opinion. It's just really sad that the politics are creating, the boxing establishments are creating the pound for pound lists, which they're including very good fighters, but it's always in favor of the more known fighters, at least in the Western world. The pound for pound lists are consisted of a lot of good fighters, but underestimating the lower weight classes, and even myself, I was guilty of it. I was believing them because I was listening to them saying that the lower weight classes are trash and that there is a lower pool of talent, but they are much more competitive, and there is a lot of talent that once again I I started discovering pretty much thanks to you and what you were saying on your own channel. It really made me, get excited about the flyweights. Although even before that, I was clearly following 115 and 112, especially with Roman Gonzalez, who I had. I was fortunate enough to discover him many years ago. I would say around 2014, something like that. But yeah, I would say the winner of Tanaka versus Ioka I may consider as a number one pound for pound, because to be honest with you, yeah, especially at the first probably the first two weight classes in which Tanaka won his belts, I would say it was also due to his size, because he was weight bully there, kind of like Inoue, but then he went on to continuously fight other great fighters at higher weight classes and prove that he's indeed a top 10 pound for pound talent. And Ioka, who's really amazing, who's a smaller fighter but really great. I would probably consider the winner of that fight number one. I don't know.
Something official. We'll try and do that because we want to try and incorporate some thematic, structured arguments about what is instrumental in boxing, or some of the sort of polarizing or issues which is causing a lot of disturbance and distortion to the sport, and hence losing hardcore boxing fans. And so maybe in one of the upcoming episodes we'll try and maybe even forget about any sort of fights, and we'll just go into a proper hardcore, detailed, structured discussion about the pound for pound, what it represents, the origins, and how much has that changed in the current modern sense, when money and corruption is very much dictating the sport, as opposed to what common sense and pragmatism should be. So maybe we'll try and focus on that and look at some of the gray areas and look at some of the ambiguities. I don't know. It's just a thought.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree. We should do that. And we should, especially you, man, you should bring more. We should do some specials. Okay, like you said, our pound for pound list, the pound for pound top 10 of the coup d'etat of boxing, and our criteria. And then really we can also showcase, make specials in the future episodes about the smaller weight classes, and people especially, they could learn especially from you a lot in that regard. And I get that people, and it was same for me. I was not always paying attention to all the weight classes, but they are so biased, man. You cannot respect their opinions if they're clearly refusing to follow certain weight classes, being it the flyweights or even cruiserweight division. So it's stupid for them to take their pound for pound lists seriously if they're not following all those fighters.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't fucking care, man, about.
Because Myris Breeders has a very good argument to be in the pound for pound top 10.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And then you would still hear guys talking about not being interested into watching tiny fighters fight, although they're not only more competitive but also more skilled and terribly underrated, man, compared to the hype jobs that they're hyping up. Not saying that those are not very good fighters as well, but there is a clear bias against certain weight classes that they're not following for one reason or the other, and we as the coup d'etat of boxing should make do the justice to the whole world of boxing. And like you said, instead of having our list being inspired by the hype, that how notorious or how hyped up certain fighters are, how famous they are, instead consider only the pure boxing, the pure class skills, and the level of opposition.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you in its entirety. Now, in terms of next week official, any significant fights? Because I know there's a card going on right now. It may even be over, but the very talented, gifted fighter Jay Harris was in action against Marcel Braithwaite. I've got no idea. The fight was taking place today. I'm not sure. What is the time now? 10:30 in the UK, 11:30 here. So that fight is already over. So we'll try and do a review definitely of Jay Harris, who put up a magnificent performance against Julio Cesar Martinez at flyweight. Uh, Fight went to the cards. Harris having suffered a knockdown, but was a brilliant, brilliant fight. So he's clearly got a hell of a lot of ability at flyweight, 112 pounds. So it'd be good to see him come back in his rehabilitation, hopefully get back. He's not going to be too phased by that fight. Took a bit of punishment, but um, seemed okay to me. Not he's not going to be mentally demoralized at all. So he was up against Marcel Braithwaite, who just came off the loss from against Sonny Edwards. Next week, official. Is there a card from Mexico? I'm not sure whether it's next week or the week after.
Exactly, the next week. In fact, we failed to cover that card, to do the preview of that card, because it's taking place on October the 23rd. I think it's Friday. Let me check it out. I think so. Yeah, so Friday the 23rd in Mexico is Eddie Hearn's Metron card in Mexico. Juan Francisco Estrada versus Carlos Cuadras, a rematch for WBC super flyweight title. And then Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez coming back versus Israel Gonzalez for WBA super flyweight title. It should be a very entertaining fight. Yeah, I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about Loma and Teofimo, deservingly so for many reasons, but we should cover the aftermath of that card for sure. And yeah, it's a triple header, because beside Juan Francisco Estrada and Roman Gonzalez, there is flyweight sensation in Julio Cesar Martinez, while the opponent of Jay Harris, which is a contender for the fight of the year. I mean, yeah, Baranchik Zepeda was probably better than any other fight, but there were a couple of great 10-rounders, man, this year. That one, Baranchik Zepeda, then Martinez, Harris, as well as on the undercard.
Madrimov and Walker. That was a brilliant fight.
Yeah, I still haven't seen that fight. I think. Oh, Was it the very last fight? Yeah, yeah, that's the one that I missed. And but by the way, on Saturday, October the 24th, on Showtime, there is Sergey Lipinets versus his replacement opponent, Cruz. I never saw him, but anyways, it's for the interim IBF belt in the welterweight division.
What
So
happened
yeah,
with
we should.
Kakarov? Was there a visa issue? I didn't.
Sorry, couldn't hear you.
What was the reason for the replacement with Abdul Kakarov? Was it a visa situation? He was unable to obtain a visa to fly into the United States, I guess.
Unfortunately, I am completely unaware of it. Corruption. I was not following. I only heard that fight. Wasn't it being replaced for? Wasn't it being rescheduled for the end of the year? Lipinets versus Abdukakaro or not? Because I'm surprised. I was thinking because I really didn't pay attention. Well, what are the reasons it got rescheduled, right? And then at the end we were getting Lipinets Clayton the next week. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's happening. I'm completely unaware. But yeah, the next show we should definitely do the post-fight review of the Mexican triple header, and well, it depends how exciting the Lipinets fight is going to be.
Yeah, because I'm unsure. There was a comment in the chat that perhaps the Roman Gonzalez fight has been cancelled, but
Haven't heard that.
yeah, so not sure about that. I haven't had the opportunity to look into that. But in any case, we'll definitely cover the fight. Looking at two of the best fighters on a collision course to meet once again and unify the WBC and the WBA super flyweight world championships in one of the most anticipated rematches of one of the greatest fights I've ever seen in their first fight. An absolutely magnificent fight. Um, so
Absolutely.
yeah, and if Gonzalez gets the victory over Estrada, then for me, he's clearly back in the top 10 pound for pound rankings without any dispute.
Yeah.
It'd be nonsensical if he's if political forces once again exclude him from, because coming back in your third phase and winning a belt and then unifying, you know, when the narrative and the widespread opinion is that fighters at super flyweight are finished in their 30s, and so what he's doing is then effectively superhuman. So why isn't he rewarded? But rhetorical questions for the idiots
Yeah,
out there.
but sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to say to make one point that well, it may be debatable, but I would say that it's since that lost in the rematch against Rungvisai, I think that Roman Gonzalez on his comeback after that fight did way better than he's getting the recognition for, because I do think he definitely, especially after the Rungvisai rematch, he was not looking as he was looking at his prime, but he was still doing a great job against a really good fighter that he disposed of in what was that 5 rounds. So I think it was underrated. It was much more about you know. Uh, it's just that he lost more of it is him losing the backing uh, of the American boxing establishment and the media, meaning that him first of all losing to Rungvisai and then HBO getting out of game, so he lost the backing he had, well, at least until the Caliphate fight. but he was never looking shot to me, even on his very next fight, right after the Rungwe style loss. So in that regard, I think that he's still underrated. I'm not saying that he's in his prime. He's not. But against Kaliafai, we even had the flashes of prime Rangwisai. Prime Chocolatito Gonzalez. I don't
Yeah,
think it's too late for him, and I would not look, man. I mean, I I would not. I would not be shocked at all if he is able to win against Estrada, who in his own way is also a really great fighter. And I must admit that the fight he had against Beeman, uh, I mean, I was over exaggerating the trouble Beeman was giving him. I mean, from the technical and boxing skill standpoint, from the standpoint of skills, he was really giving him trouble without any doubt. The little Beeman, but I was thinking that I was overreacting about him getting hurt by Beeman. Um, so he did really well. He stayed composed against Beamon, despite Beamon giving him many sorts of troubles. But it was not that hard of a fight that I initially thought.
yeah.
So, yeah, it
Go,
would be
go with
yeah.
the
So
striker
if
for sure. The better the competition, the better his performance is. And he in a lot of the other
yeah.
fights, he doesn't really get motivated, and he just tends to fuck around. He's a big game player, and yeah,
Definitely,
when
definitely, man. And yeah, well, another point that I forgot to mention. Yeah, we were talking about who would be the future pound for pound king right after this fight that Loma had against Teofimo. Well, we were mentioning Ioka and Tanaka, but man, in fact, Juan Francisco Estrada and Chocolatito, maybe the winner of that fight would probably be the number one fighter on my list.
yeah, you know, Roman in his comeback is what, 3 knockouts, beaten 2 champions, one former, one incumbent, and if he beats Estrada, that's an incumbent champion, 2 division champion, former unified champion as well. So it's a very strong argument. Um, yeah, that's. We'll look at all of the permutations and all of the players and all of the. We'll look at all of those components. We'll definitely try and do that show. Um, so official. That'll put.
Yeah, okay. Okay, my last point. We should consider, as we are talking about the next week's show. Yeah, of course, we are going to cover the Mexican triple header, but also we could talk about. We could do a little preview maybe of Usyk versus Chisora, who's the fight which is happening a week after the Mexican triple header. Then Usyk Chisora. Then there is, not really worth mentioning, Gassiev versus Seferi. Gassiev's heavyweight debut. Neither Davis against Santa Cruz. Well, it may be interesting, not really highly regarded fight in my opinion, but I don't know. But there is also another fight now, Inoue versus Jason Moloney. So all of these fights are happening just week after the Mexican triple header. So
Right.
beside covering, doing the post-fight review of Mexican triple header, we can do a couple of previews for those fights.
Fantastic idea. Yeah, definitely want to cover all of those fights, especially Usyk and Inoue and Tank Davis and Leo Santa Cruz. That definitely has some intrigue to the fight.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, absolutely, we'll cover those. So um, want to thank everybody who joined us for the sixth transmission of the Coup d'etat of boxing. covering the post-fight of the highly anticipated fight in the early hours of this morning. I want to thank Virtuoso, El Dog, Philo, Tim Nealon, B Space, the Shepherd of Suns, Duck. Who else? We've got Apology Man.
Apology Man.
See you there, my friend.
There was okay Shep, then BT from True School Sports, which is those are my friends. A great duo between a son and his dad, who's a legend in his own way. The legendary Pops. Big up to him. Big up to BT Brandon from True School Sports. Intangible Boxing, L Dog, Saint Brit, the usuals. And by the way, guys, we are really thankful to you for being with us tonight, because we were expecting way less viewers for the live show, being that we are doing this show just day after a big fight, and so many other boxing channels are live as well, and you chose to stick with us, so big thank you for that.
Yeah, also a big
And
thank you
sorry for
to JJJ, I'm Phil, Diego Bandido, Sena Mercia, Overhand, Azzy, Quags.
yeah, definitely
all the-
Timmy
yeah.
Nealon. And
All the-
I would even like to give a big shout out to JD Boxing on Twitter, who's really supportive of our channel. I don't know if he is currently listening or not, but big up to him, JD Boxing. Thank you, Timmy,
Also,
everybody
Tango,
else.
thank you as well for joining. Okay. Official. Everybody, be safe, and we'll see you back this time next week for the Coup d'etat Boxing episode 7.